Welcome to Divine Downloads. I'm your host, Cassandra, and this is the show where we help you divinely design your life. And today's episode could not be more aligned with that mission. We are talking to Cathleen Beerkens, the author of the book, Your Creator Matrix: How to Use Optimal Wellness and Quantum Healing to Master Your Story and Create Your Reality. And I just have to say, I read all the books before I interview anybody for the podcast, but this book really just took so many concepts that I was already familiar with and brought them to a whole nother level. So I'm so excited to share this conversation with you. Your creator matrix is the interconnected framework that links your mind, body, and spirit on all levels. So your physical, your mental, your emotional, and your spiritual with the unified field. And according to Kathleen, when we master our stories, the deeply held narratives and beliefs that influence all of our choices and creations, and we really learn how to digest our life experiences in new ways, we gain the power to choose new future timelines and manifest the wellness, the abundance, and the love that we truly desire. So without further ado, let's dive into this episode. I am so excited to share this with you. I'm putting the recording on because I feel like just even chatting to you before we started recording, there's so much I'm like, no, I want everyone to hear this. So I have with me beautiful Cathleen Beerkens, who is the author of The Creator Matrix. And I just have to tell you guys, like, I have been devouring this book the past few days, and it is just a wealth of so much knowledge on so many different things. But as we were just like chatting about, it's like, these things that right now that we're kind of separating that really create this holistic, balance that all of us are, I think, going to be moving into as we evolve and shift, and Earth evolves and shifts with us. So, welcome to the show, Kathleen. And
thank you.
How did this become? How did you get to this place to write Creator Matrix? What inspired your journey?
So I purposely called it Your Creator Matrix because I wanted it to be owned. I wanted all of us to own our Creator Matrix. So it's Your Creator Matrix. But what I want to say is I started my whole, process years ago. I was a nurse and a teacher at Georgetown University, and I was seeing firsthand what was happening in the mainstream medical system. It was shocking. I was young. It was very scary to see all this disease, right? And all these people so vulnerable. So that's the first shock. That was like, oh, then I had my children. We all have kids, right? And that's where you really learn your lesson. So I had 3 children, and they all had issues, some physical, some mental, some emotional. And the mainstream wasn't helping me. I was very disappointed. I have a family of all doctors, really a lot of nurses, many. And still, I was trying to find answers for these problems that my kids were having, and I couldn't through that avenue. I won't name all the places, but I went to so many places. And I started with my firstborn, who's now a doctor. And he was sick, and his immune system was struggling. And so I went through this whole process physically first, but then the next child was more like I would say all over the place, ADHD, and a real cutie, but yeah, she wasn't very grounded. So I was really like, oh gosh, what am I going to do now? This one is crazy. And I had to help her somehow. And I really tried, and I sought out, in the book, I tell my story, also my journey with my health. We all have our own journey, right? And then the little one also with emotional issues. So I learned a lot through my children, through my family, through myself, seeking integrated. I like to say integrative, not alternative, because I don't believe anything should have ever been called alternative. That is not the correct word. Integrative is what we're going towards. And I see it every day. I work with doctors and practitioners and therapists as I have a course all over the world, and they take my course, and I see where they're going because they want this holistic education. So what you were asking is why we have to integrate, like, parts of us we've learned all, like, some of us are experts in the physical. Others are experts, like they're psychiatrists and they're experts in the emotional and mental. And others still are like do the journey and then they do trauma work. I mean, there's so much that many people are doing. And I think all of them are amazing. But what I think is important, and I spent 5 years writing this book kind of along my course so I could develop and do research. I love to do research. And I just discovered that the only way that we're going to actually where we're going is to integrate all aspects of ourselves. If we cannot, if we don't see all aspects, if we're not aware, like if we're only aware of our physical, I'll give you an example. We're just really busy with the food. We're busy with our physical symptoms. We go to the doctor all the time, or we don't. We do other ways to heal those physical. Whatever we do, eventually, the only way we're going to heal is that we're led to another dimension. So if we, for instance, are busy with the emotional, then we might have physical or even spiritual. Like I tell this in the book, but it is actually funny. I was meditating to the whatever dimension one year, many years ago. It was very funny. I used to have these new energy meetings because I knew I had a knowingness that there was going to be this big shift. And I was helping people heal on all these levels. And I literally was like in the back of the room with all these very special people, really spiritually very advanced, and they were all physically sick. And I thought to myself as a nurse, this is not how we're supposed to be. I mean, this is like ridiculous, like cancer, autoimmune, and then diabetes and blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking as a nurse, this is not what we are supposed to be, because all of those people who are very spiritual could be doing amazing work for humanity, but they're too tired, they're too sick, they can't. So I knew then, and this was many years ago, there is a problem. So we have to start integrating all these aspects. And yes, there's a lot in this book, and for any of you who want to start and read it, I encourage you to just go one chapter at a time and sort of integrate the material and just say, okay, what fits, what resonates with me, what is new, what do I know already? And then it starts to just happen. So I know that is because my work and my research has led me to what is really healing us is frequency.
Yes. Oh
That's
gosh.
fun.
Okay. So I want to put a pin in that because we have to get back to frequency, and I also want to talk about kind of this new age that we're in and kind of what's
Yes.
moving through with that. But I just want to like pause for a second, just for anyone that's listening that's like, okay, what is my creator matrix? How would you define that?
Yeah. So I tell my story, how I awakened to all these aspects of myself to help others understand that they have the same process. Now, I will say that the new kids have less to do. Our new children, believe it or not, they're pure. Their DNA is a bit different. They already have a lot cleared. But the older you are, the more you have to do the work. But that doesn't mean that if you're young, you don't have any work to do. That's not true. But I think it's the power of starting to observe yourself critically, lovingly, by the way. I want to say lovingly on all these aspects and really feeling how much you know yourself. Because so that's what the book is about. It helps you to know yourself better on a really deep level. And the idea is that healing is not fixing. That's what I was told and trained to be as a nurse. Really, it's to become whole. And so, in order to become whole and all these aspects integrated, we have to understand them and we have to know ourselves on all those levels. And sometimes We have to do the work to heal certain aspects on certain levels that are blocking our sort of development, we would say.
Yeah. So would you say it's overall kind of looking at how all these multidimensional aspects of us really connect to our overall frequency
Totally.
and kind of seeing like what are the areas where, you know, let's say I might be like doing really well and like I'm eating like high frequency foods or whatnot, right?
Yeah.
You know, but then I might have another story from my childhood that's low frequency,
Yes.
right? And it's like we have
Yeah.
all these different things. Um, and oh my God, there's so much to get. So actually, before we get into all this, because I want to go into, there's so many good things you talk about in the book around like owning our stories, around manifestation and digestion, and this yin yang balance. That I really want to get into all of it. But you already kind of teased it around, you know, this kind of new age that we're entering in, the age of Aquarius. Kind of, can you talk a little bit about like what is
Sure.
actually shifting
Yes.
on the, you know, on the planet right now that's having all of us awaken to this and really making this like the next level of showing up for humanity and
That's
ourselves, obviously, in that evolution.
Yeah, and for some of you listening, you're really open to this. And I'm sure that you said your audience is. I work with very mainstream also. So I have to explain it scientifically. So I'm just going to go there.
Yeah, I mean, we love
Yeah. Yeah.
it.
Okay, good. Okay. The first thing is that um, there are people on the planet that have a knowingness and have been in touch with the universal field, let's say, that know this change is coming for a long time. That's very spiritual. But there's scientists like NASA and other scientists who know there's a change coming because they're of the position of the Earth. So as we watch Earth go, like Earth travels through space, right? And it travels through certain parts of space. And it's been in a very dark place for like 11 to 14,000 years. And we call the whole cycle the precession of the equinox. But now, right now, we're in a new time, and that can be scientifically proven. And we're in a photon belt. We entered around 2020. Can you imagine this new time? Interesting, COVID.
Yeah.
And the photon belt is we are all of a sudden. It's like we were in darkness, and then the lights are on. Well, when we put the lights on all over Earth, we can't see that light. That's a light that's there, but it's not with the eyes. It's not visible because much light is not that we can see with our eyes. Perhaps someday, but right now we can't see it, but we can feel it. So, for instance, there there are solar flares that give us more light. There are coronal mass ejections that are coming every day that we never saw before. They get more and more. So from 2020 till now, and you can look at NASA and see this. And so these flares are raising the heartbeat of Earth, the Schumann resonance, and they're affecting our DNA. And what I've come to understand, and I believe, and maybe will be proven, certainly, I hope, totally soon. I think some people probably have already proven it, but I really believe it is true. We have seen, we just discovered DNA the last century. We don't really understand much about the DNA. We are just starting. So we understood it physically first, but remember, we exist multidimensionally. So our DNA also exists all in all those levels. Imagine that. So as we are awakening, what's happening is the DNA, we used to call it dormant DNA that we didn't understand. We saw that it was just there, but it wasn't activated. What we believe to be happening is as we enter this new age, which people call the age of Aquarius, age of enlightenment, ascension, we are obviously changing. The earth is changing very rapidly. We are changing very rapidly. It's really wild and a wild ride, right? But a very special time to be on earth. I think we all have to be grateful because it really is amazing to be here right now. But so getting back to the story, entering this photon belt, what we see are these class flares that have started, and really this year, like massively. And they are, I believe, they are awakening that part of that dormant DNA, and they are helping us to ascend and integrate and go into another density. And that's a really big word. And I can explain the difference, if you would like, between dimension and density for all of, maybe some of you don't know what that means.
Yeah, for sure. I also want to talk a little bit. It's interesting because I was very familiar with Age of Aquarius, Schumann frequency. I've read like there have been a lot of different texts that have kind of predicted this shift,
Yes.
right, on the more
Yeah.
spiritual end of things. But then, and then, I knew about solar flares, but the coronal mass ejections that you were talking about, it was wild because it literally just came into my orbit probably the past like month or two. Did I
Okay.
start like hearing about this? And then I'm like, oh my God, she's talking about. So I'm curious. Let's talk about the difference between like density and dimension. But I also want to talk a little bit about what are in your opinion or in your research, what are the kind of things that are already happening right now as a result of this? And are there kind of
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. It's a
what's
good
happening
question.
to our physical bodies and what's happening on Earth as a result of this? Are there certain symptoms or things that are going around right now that are really this?
Yes. So imagine we put the light on all of those dimensions. First of all, it's very uncomfortable because we've been in darkness for so long. So imagine that I put you in a dark room and you live there. You do not see the cobwebs, you do not see the spiders. You do not see all the things that might have developed over centuries in that dark room. Suddenly, from one day to the next, I turn that light on. You see all the cobwebs, you see all the spiders, you see all the cracks in the wall, you see all the things. It's uncomfortable. It's like, oh, wow. And the biggest thing we're seeing is we're waking up to the reality that in the dark, we didn't realize, many of us, that we were creating or affecting our reality. We were sort of in a system, or I call it a matrix, that just didn't allow, like we were playing out these roles and in duality. And they are, victim, perpetrator, savior roles. So we came back many lives, we kept coming back, we kept playing different roles. Let's see, I'd like to, go down there, be in the densest, darkest place, forget who I am, and just have this story and see how I do, let's say. And we go there and we have these stories, and then it was so heavy in certain centuries that we only lived 30 years because it would be too much for us energetically to handle that. Now, since like 2000 years ago, there's been the shift that has come, but really in the 1960s we really started seeing the changes, and people started to awaken in massive numbers. Now, right now, it is just going to be everybody soon. So it is going to happen very fast now. And so what is happening is that the people are awakening to the light, to seeing more, and it feels uncomfortable. So physically, on all levels, they're going to experience things. If in the DNA physically they had been injured in another life, they can have pain somewhere. It can just come. They don't know what it's from. If physically they have not taken care of their body in this life, it can be suddenly broken down with that much light. They can develop a quick disease. And disease, by the way, is disease. So it's not what people think. It's an imbalance, and we should be taught that, and that we can change it, because so often we're scared about that. And that's what I saw in the hospital, and it's very overwhelming actually for the people. So going back to this though, so imagine on the emotional level, you have in the DNA storylines that were really shocking, and very low frequency emotions got stuck in the DNA, like, let's say, guilt. Maybe you killed someone by accident, or you didn't, but your ancestors. Or like I found out, and I tell this in the book, that I inherited a lot from a great great grandmother. So I went, this is a really interesting story. I went to a kinesiologist when I moved to the Netherlands because my mother-in-law saw that I was so afraid of my children getting sick. She said, Kathleen, you're always so worried. Do you think that maybe there's something? And I said, yeah, I really don't understand this. I want to understand it. So I went to this kinesiologist and she started to work with me. And at that time, the energy was a bit heavier. We're already lighter. So you can heal much quicker than you could back then. So it took me so many times to figure it out. But eventually, one day I go to her and she finds that I inherited from this great great grandmother from my mother's side a lot. I mean, crazy. And I didn't know anything. You don't ask your grandmother about your, what normally we don't, right?
Yeah.
I only had one memory of my grandmother, that she showed me a picture of this woman. Can you imagine? So when I was a little girl, my grandmother pulled me aside and she said, look, Kathleen, this is your great grandmother, your ancestors. She fought for your rights to vote. She was a suffragette. And I didn't know what it was, but it was, I saw a woman with a top hat in front of the White House. So I just remember the White House. I didn't, but it stuck with me, you know? And there I was with this kinesiologist knowing nothing but that about this particular woman. And she said, yeah, this woman lost almost all of her children. And I was like, oh no, oh my gosh, you know, that's crazy. My grandmother never mentioned that. And so but we did some work with the kinesiologist and I literally felt like a ton of bricks lifted from me, like an entire brick of heaviness that I had felt my whole life, fear and anxiety for nothing that I was just carrying. And then I called my grandmother because I wanted to see if it was correct, right? You want to, so I said, we called her Mimi and she's now in heaven, but I said, Mimi, can you tell me about your grandmother on your mom's side? And she said, oh, Mama Alice, she was my favorite. And I said, oh, what was she like? And she started saying, oh, she was funny and she was this, but she had a nervous disease. And I said, oh, she said, yeah, they put her in one of those places, those Looney Tunes. And I said, why? And she said, because she lost all her children and almost all, but the two, like my line, and from smallpox. We think it's smallpox because that's what happened back then. In the you know, people, all families were wiped out. You know, it's hard for us to imagine. But anyway, I was just like, oh my word, how did she know? You know, like that was my big awakening. I was like, how could she know this? But anyway, so that's a story, right, Cassandra?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm like, oh my God, you know, my great grandmother also lost two babies. I'm like,
Yeah.
whew. But that is just, so you were talking about how part of this, like shifting into this new frequency and aligning with, you know, the light that's coming in is also about us kind of doing that, us doing that work, right? And
Yes.
clearing the blocks in our frequency. So by having these, and there has been a lot of this, like, and it's so hard because sometimes I really try to, it's so hard, I think, at this point, sometimes for any of us to discern, like in the media, like what's real and what's not or whatnot
Of
sometimes.
course. Of course.
But I have noticed, you know, that was me and my husband were talking about it, that like the past year or two, there's been just like a flood of more people getting sick, more people getting, you know,
Totally.
diseases that were way more rare, you know, like just coming out, a lot more people with like MS, a lot more
Yeah.
people with different rare cancers that like pop out of nowhere. So it is interesting, this concept that, you know, some of these things are popping up. Is there any other way you feel like it pops up in our life besides disease as well, that kind of like
Mental
illuminate?
breakdown. Mental breakdown. The mental hospitals all over the world are packed. And it's, you know, the thing is, it's all connected. So the fact that we put them in a mental place and we don't realize that it's body, mind, you know, spirit, emotion, soul, it's everything together is ridiculous. We have to start treating holistically people. And this is why my big mission is to help the mainstream medicine make the shift to the new time. So I train health and wellness coaches all over the world holistically so they can learn that knowledge to help clients one-on-one, because doctors and nurses, they don't have time for this. They really don't. It's all so hectic in the hospital. It's crazy. So we need a new system, right? We need a new way. But you asked me about density and dimension. And I think we have to get back to that, because in order for people to understand healing, they need to understand these two words, and they get intermixed, right? People really don't always understand the difference. So dimension is a state. It's like a matrix. That's why I called the your creator matrix, but it's like what we see in a physical space. So our dimension we've been in, living on an earth, in the heaviness and the darkness, was 3 dimension. And that was all we saw. So that's geometry. So when we look at it, we imagine it's like a triangle. And if you could just imagine this in your head, we could only see what was in the triangle. But now you can imagine we add another point. So now it's 4th dimension. And then it's 5th. That's like huge. Like we can't even comprehend how much more we're going to see, right? But we're going to see a lot more. Density is just referring to the vehicle that we have, the body, mind, spirit, soul complex. And what it means is it's the amount of light that the vehicle, our body, can carry. So when we were in 3 density, we could only carry a certain level of light. And if you remember me saying we were in the darkness, it wasn't very much. So
Yeah.
now, so we're going to much higher light now. And that's
And
what.
would you say that right now we're in 4D moving to 5D, or are people in different densities
I think,
simultaneously right
yeah,
now?
I think this is so interesting question, because we could all speculate exactly. Like it's almost like trying to measure the Schumann resonance, which changes every day, right? And it's going higher and higher. I think we're all depending on our consciousness and our choices in a certain density that feels comfortable, but we're all challenged. And that's really hard for people right now, to look at another way of thinking, which might be totally out of their scope of understanding. And then the reaction is, oh my God, no, that's crazy. That's a crazy thought, right? But in the end, is it a crazy thought? So then that's cognitive dissonance kicking in. So the 3D is familiar. We know it. We understand it. It's very physical. It's very linear. As we start to go out of those realms to 4th and 5th density, we start to have more opportunity, and I talk about it in the book, to be more observant. We see more in 4th density. 4th density is still very physical, but in 4th density, we start to make a shift physically that is really wild, from carbon base, and this is what I do the science on, to crystalline. And people would say, what does that look like? Well, on a physical level, we're made of carbon structures, if any chemist here. And we have a whole, periodic table that explains how chemistry works. And this science was really pioneered first, right? And in physics, like also, but now we're doing quantum physics. So now quantum physics is challenging physics. And now we're going to have other ideas of chemistry, let's say, which is not going to be carbon based. And we are not there yet, but it's going to come, where we start to get different ideas of structure. So till now, our body has been a certain structure made of proteins, fats, nucleic acids, and glycans. And no one even knows what glycans are, which is really ridiculous, because it's one of the most important things in our bodies. But glycans are crystals. They're sugars. And I believe what I'm going to guess at is that as we make this ascension, we're going to become more crystalline, meaning we're going to have more and more of those glycans. And we're going to be less and less heavy with protein and fats. And you can see the change in our eating habits now. And that doesn't mean the bad sugars, by the way. For all of you listening, you might be like, sugars, that's horrible. because we have been eating the bad sugars. But I am not talking about those sugars. I am talking about sugars that make every cell of our body. And if you didn't know that, there are 8 essential sugars, and they are critical for our health and our well-being and our bodies to function optimally.
Yeah. And okay, I'm going to ask like a totally selfish question on this
Yeah,
because this is
sure.
like so one of the I don't want to say like I'm a little bit more of the medical medium camp, if
Yes.
you are familiar with that, right?
Yeah, sure.
And so I have been, mostly plant-based for like the better
Very
part of a
nice.
decade, and like, focused on a lot of the, like, for me, eliminating, like, I feel like fruit is like one of the most high frequency
Yeah.
foods and all that stuff. Anyway, and simultaneously, I think it's really interesting because I've watched with the rise of, people like medical medium and like that kind of information, like disseminating a little bit more. Like when I first started doing a lot of that, just like you mentioned in the book you did, I had to do an elimination diet. I had, which I feel like was part of my awakening journey, was the
Yeah.
elimination diet and figuring out what works with my body. But still to this day, fast forward like a decade, people look at me like I'm nuts sometimes because, we live in now, like there's literally a thing as like the carnivore diet, and, people that will only eat meat, right? And eat keto and like all of these heavier, like more protein focused things, right? And so I'm just curious, and I'm this is not, and I've never been like, I'm never someone that's like trying to like make anyone feel bad about their food
Yeah.
choices.
Yeah.
but I'm just curious, from this concept that you're talking about with our frequency changing and how that's literally going to affect us on a physical level, what do you make of these two kind of schools of thought kind of really diverging? And do you think, yeah, I'm just curious.
Okay. So, first of all, thoughts create our reality. So, you are also one of the new kids, Cassandra. It matters because I believe that, remember, I explained we're coming in, the new kids are coming in with a different genes and different things have cleared from them. Like you can't compare me to you. I'm much older. So, and I believe that doesn't mean I can't adjust and make the changes. I am making them, but I can feel it's a little bit more difficult than my children. They're they're adapting very quickly. So I so what do I think of it? First of all, I believe that we're not there yet. So physically, we do inherit certain things from our DNA on how we eat, and that's called nutrigenetics, like how we we eat, how we have been eating for eons is in our genes. And so that affects how we react to food, and that's proven. But we also have a reaction the other way, where how what we choose, and we don't have all that, maybe always healthy choices right now, because you could say, okay, I'm where you were just asking about protein, but we're talking about processed food and stuff, and how all that genetically modified food and all that might be affecting our epigenome or our genetics is also a problem right now. So
Yeah.
we have two problems. But you asked the question, how what matters. I think what I teach is that it's bio individual right now, because we're all on different levels of change and we have to listen to our body. So I believe the blood group diet, not as absolute at all, but as a kind of helps us to kind of make better choices, I would say. So, for instance, I was a O positive, and I definitely do better when I don't eat a lot of grains, but the grains also have been altered. That's another problem. So we could say you can eat grains, but I would encourage, and I talk about in the book, eating ancient grains if you can really try to find that, because that has been proven a lot healthier for us. But the thing is, what I believe bioindividuality means is that we all are in this evolutionary phase very much quick. So we have to listen to our body. So if I look at my story, when I was younger, I did eat a lot more meat. I don't hardly eat any red meat anymore, but I do eat like organic chicken, or I'll eat like certain kinds of fish if I, like some. And I eat it less, and I notice that I feel better. So
Yeah.
you have to, but I don't take it out because I
Yeah.
know I still am made of, every cell of my body still needs protein to process and be healthy. So
Yeah.
but for others like who are vegetarians, and that's, I work with, health coaches, this is our work. They have to find protein in other ways. They still need protein. It's not
Absolutely.
like we're already there and we're in fifth density and we're like light beings already. Because
Yeah.
if we were, we wouldn't be seeing ourselves the same way.
Right.
Anyway, that's funny.
No, I agree with you. And I also, out of all the kind of quote unquote like diet theories, the blood type diet is, I'm AB, which
Yes.
also syncs up with,
Oh yeah, new most sensitive child.
right?
Yes.
So it's, yeah, I also agree with that one. That's most. And I think that's true. And I think that's also, you know, that's what I also like try to tell a lot of people as well, because I know very clearly, and a lot of people, when they, when I had all my food allergies and when I have certain things, like I have like very intense negative reactions.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to like say like, oh my God, like I'm just like great at self-control around things. Like my
Yeah.
body makes it easy for me,
Yeah.
I think. Because I just, you wouldn't eat most people wouldn't eat something if they felt like they were going to have to go to the hospital afterwards. Right. So it
No.
doesn't take too much, but,
No.
that, yeah, like as we're evolving, we have to be attuned to that and shift into, also depending on maybe like what we're clearing, what we're moving through in our life, like what's kind of that season might depend on what we need. So I love that. So as far as frequency goes, and we have, I think with food, you talk about in the book, how we have a frequency, food has a frequency. And, I think within reason, I would venture to say most listeners know kind of, whole foods, foods that are organic from the earth, or, but what are the other, I think one of the things that, like you were talking about in medicine and in our, kind of mainstream healing culture, that we don't often talk about. And it's funny, you mentioned Joe Dispenza a lot in the book. I'm a big Joe Dispenza fan, done a ton of his retreats and whatnot. And he sometimes dismisses food and just says like, hey, let's just work on, the quantum field, and like fix your electromagnetic field,
Yeah.
and all of that. Can we talk about the ways like outside of the conventional like food
Yes.
diet things that we can kind
Absolutely.
of help our frequency and our field?
Well, first of all, we are connected. Our cells are connected, whether we realize it or not, to a quantum field. And we have a choice, it's called free will, how much we want to connect to that field, and even if we acknowledge that field. But that field scientifically has been proven. So, what Joe Dispenza is actually talking about is, and I do frequency healing for years, I see the effects of it. Do I think it's only that? No. I think we're all, remember what I said, it's all layers matter. We don't, we cannot deny because this is what I want to say, if our beliefs are not strong enough, then we will have, because the belief is what's going to make the difference in how we heal. So if we don't believe that we're going to heal in our subconscious, and yet we go to Joe Dispenza and he believes, but we don't believe, and that subconscious has not been reprogrammed because it's from the DNA. You inherit it. Remember, I told you all the things that could have happened in your ancestors. So then you could have a block from you healing. So it's important to understand how the field heals and that it is triumphing everything. I do believe that, but I do believe we have to be connected to it and connected to Mother Earth. It's sort of like, look at an apple tree. if I take an apple off an apple tree, which is what we're doing with our food, by the way, and put it in a warehouse for like 3 months and then give it to someone to eat, how can that be good for us? Once we take the apple from the tree, it's separated from its source, right? The energy
Yeah.
source. And so we are eating a lot of food the way we've allowed green harvesting and all the transport of foods in these warehouses. We have allowed this, so we cannot blame others. This is what I want to say right now. Very important that we realize humanity has done this together. So I know we can get upset with companies, and they have been very greedy, and there have been a lot of things, and I talk about that in the book. But in order to change, we can only change any structure right now with love. So that means not go against it, not say you're bad, not judge it, but rather say, okay, let's observe it. Let's work together. Let's see how we can make this a better system, right? So the food system needs to be changed. But getting back to that, because the apple has been in the warehouse, it generally degraded every day. So what is actually nourishing us when we eat food that comes from nature is when we take it and we eat it right away, it's been connected to that frequency, that high frequency light, and it comes into our body and it restores our cell light. We have light around every cell. And if we don't eat it like that, which many of us are not, then yeah, we're not really restoring the frequency. So we're all tired and exhausted. And by the way, you asked me this question, do we have effects from the ascension? Yes. We have not only the illness, but I wanted to say we have headaches, we have aches in our bodies, we have so many things, sleepy, exhaustion. So every time one of those flares comes and those CMEs, they make us tired. Like, I don't know if you've been tired, but some days I'm thinking, wow, this year I've been more tired. But it is
Oh,
that.
yes. Past
Yeah.
2 years, I feel like I felt like
Yeah.
a lot of things.
Yeah. And that's when it really increased 2 years ago.
But we also have the power, like you talk about in the book, and Joe Dispenza also, I think, teaches, a lot of spiritual teachers talk about this, right? That we have the power to plug our field into the source field, right? And so can we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
How can people be doing that on a regular basis so that, yeah, we have that. We can plug in and recharge our own batteries during this.
It's really important that we acknowledge that we are that field, that it's not separate. Like we were kind of taught in religion that, and I was very raised Catholic, we were taught it was outside of us and we have to pray to something. I think it's more an inner connection that has to be connected. Like it's all about connection. And so once you acknowledge that field, you connect to it. And you can acknowledge it anyway. I'm not going to say it's right, wrong. Many spiritual masters right now are saying, oh, you can connect by meditation. You can connect by chanting. You can connect by sound frequencies. You can connect. I think you can connect just by saying, I connect. I mean,
Wow. Yeah.
honestly, I don't think it's so complicated. I think we just have to know that we can connect. Now, that doesn't mean that religion didn't serve us at the time, I think it was necessary, like everything we've gone through. But now we're in a new time, so we have to call it something else. But it doesn't really matter what you call it. Like if you call it, a field or prime creator or source or God or whatever feels comfortable for you, it doesn't matter. Just as long as you understand how special it is that we're all connected to it and actually all connected to each other.
I love that. And you talked a little bit about earlier, to jump back a little bit, about actually, this might have been before we were even recording, about how, the name of the game is really like kind of clearing our field and helping to like shift our frequency that way. can we talk
Yeah.
about what are some ways that we can see what needs to be cleared? What are some practices that you like to utilize?
Yes, that's a good question. Well, first of all, we can do a lot of things, but I want everyone to understand structure is function. You have a body. My sister and I worked on this book Body, Mind, Spirit, Soul Complex, Your Creator Matrix. We worked on this for 5 years to help people because she's an artist. And I said, I want to show this visually. So what she did was she made pictures, like digital paintings, which are like 30 layers deep to show this multidimensional effect of light. And she wanted to help people to understand each picture has a book, and the book represents our creator matrix, and that we are responsible for it on all levels. So the first thing to understand is that. The second thing is to start observing. And two things about structure is function is that on our cell level, on all those levels, all those dimensions, if we need to clean like we clean our bodies. We need to clean them all the time, not just the ancestors. Like if we had a bad day, we need to clean, like we're in a bad mood, we're in a low frequency emotion. We need to be able to recognize that we're affecting other people with that, and we need to be able to change that, and we can do that instantly when we observe it. So as we look at all layers, they can be cleaned, okay? And I just talk about how beautiful the physical cleaning can be too. Like that is such a wonderful, like have you ever done that? Like you do like a 2-week cleanse and you just feel lighter. It's really true.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I've done water fasting, juice
Yeah.
fasting, all
Yeah.
sorts of, and it's just you just feel like you feel incredible. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one thing. And so you can cleanse with a thought. You can cleanse with raising your emotional frequency and not getting stuck in lower emotions. You can cleanse physically by what you reduce your eating. And if you're going to do a severe fast, you really need to be with a doctor. I'm going to say that
I
right
was
now.
medically supervised for all
Yeah, please.
that.
Yeah. And then you have to clean and you have to build. So you have to realize that everything you allow in your body, that's the law of allowing, everything that you allow on all levels, like what you eat, who's in your life, what job you choose, what person you marry, if you don't marry, it's fine, whatever, also not
Yeah.
connect,
Yeah.
that you have chosen it. And all of it affects your creator matrix. And so you have to be responsible then for, if you don't like how it's going, changing the story yourself in the most loving way you can. And this is really interesting, isn't it? So we say cleaning, building. How do we build? How do we create our reality? How do we build every cell of our body every day? 1,000,000 cells a second we build. And whatever we eat either builds them or not, based
Yep.
on what we put in it. What we choose to do every day with our life, what we choose to think about, all of it will affect this creator matrix. So ultimately, then you could look at the whole creator matrix and you could say, is it high functioning or low functioning? Well, it depends on all those dimensions, dimensions.
Yeah.
So it can be high functioning, but it can get blocked. So what really like comes to, so cleaning, building, choosing. Cleaning, building, choosing, rechoosing, remaking, constantly. We're going to have to constantly do that right now because the world is not stable. It's going through an entropic experience. You know what that means?
Yeah.
It's breaking down on all
Yeah.
levels.
So, yes. And I feel like that's reflecting in a lot of our microcosms of that world.
Exactly. So imagine all of those dimensions are also breaking down to be built again, but they
For
have to
us
be
to
built by
rebuild them.
us. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love how early on in the book you kind of start off with the topic of responsibility, right? And I think that to me is like such a big part of like what you just said, right? Is just owning that what is currently going on in your life and your frequency, all aspects of it, is really your responsibility. And in that, it's funny because I do this thing, I do EFT tapping, and I have some like YouTube videos that I share different tapping. And one of my like just personal like isms whenever I tap, and therefore in my videos I put out, is I always say like, if I haven't manifested this thing or if whatever it is, it's because I'm blocking it. Right. And that's good news, because if I'm blocking it, then I can clear it and I can open it. Right. And literally, like, it was perfect. A couple weeks ago, I get an email from someone that follows the videos and is like, listen, I really, really like your videos, but I hate that you do this. I hate that you're always saying like, it's my fault, I'm blocking it, because I feel like it's really negative. And I was like, well, you know, I respect your opinion if it doesn't resonate with you, but my perspective of it is actually, I feel like it's incredibly empowering for me to claim that the only reason I don't have a thing I desire in my life is me. Because by me saying it's society, or it's because of this circumstance, or it's because my parents never had money, or it's because my whatever past life of this, right? It's like, it's all taking that responsibility away from me, and therefore taking away my creatorship, as you would call it, right? And so I love that like fundamental building block that I think is massive sometimes for people to get through, right? Mm-hmm. Just that one foundational thing of, by like, the good news is that you have the power, right?
You do.
The bad news is that you then have to claim that you have the power. And
exactly. I love that. Cassandra, that's so fun.
So I love that, really being able to take that look at your life and saying, okay, you know, looking through these different dimensions in my physical world, how have I owned that power? How aware have I been? And, you know, there's different levels, right, to that, of like how aware you can go and like where you are on that spectrum. And even though I would venture to say I'm probably more conscious of that, especially because of my health journey, than most, I still know that I could even go farther, right? Like you were saying, right? Like, I'm still buying apples from an organic grocery store, right? I don't have an orchard or like a thing where I can, right? So as you're saying that, I'm like, man,
well,
I really
better than
I need to get a garden.
Other things.
Right?
But Cassandra, it's better than other options, right? Organic is better than other options.
Exactly. So it's like kind of, it's like giving yourself grace along the process and being like, okay, how can I move in the right direction? And as well as that goes. And then, you know, also looking at, like you were saying, like the stories that we're telling yourself, the emotions. And I love that you brought up, because I know that you're familiar with a lot of different modalities as well, that, you know, energy clearing and moving modalities that I utilize as well. But I also have found myself, especially more recently, saying things like that, where it's like, I love all of that stuff. Like, I'm down with all of that till like the cows come home. And sometimes all you just need is the awareness.
Yeah,
right?
That's true.
Right? True. That like sometimes when you can just call it out and say, wow, I am in a bad mood right now. Do I want to be in a bad mood? Do I need to be in a bad mood? Right? Or whatever it is. Like, we can also, I feel like with this new shift that we're moving through, like you were saying, we can let it be a lot more simpler than maybe it's been in the past.
Yeah. And the EFT, by the way, I totally believe in, because we train our coaches in EFT on a very high level. So I love that you made that sentence for yourself because that sentence served you. And I just want to say that we all have to make our own sentences because that's how unique we are. So it is, if it serves you, it feels good, it makes a shift. That's all that matters. One of the sentences I teach my students every day to say, on all levels, by the way, is I give my body, mind, spirit, soul permission to release anything that is not from me and not for my highest good. And I promise you, if you say that, you're going to feel better because
Yes.
because we collect a lot from people.
Yes, it's kind of like you were saying before, like we take a shower every day, like giving ourselves a little shower frequency, a little shower to just be like, give you permission. I'm sure you do this working with people, but like from being someone that works with a lot of clients, right? I'm always like, I release anything that's not mine,
Yeah,
right? And I claim
yeah.
only, what's in the highest good. But we should all be doing that because we all interact with like so many things on any given day that we all need to be energetically showering. I want to be conscious of your time. We're going a little bit over. Do you have a few more minutes, or do you want
Yes, I have a few
to?
more. I do. 'Cause
Okay,
I was thinking it was important in this conversation to mention one thing,
go
and
for
that
it.
is the creative. Yeah, I think it's important because it's what I called it the creator circle. So what's been hard in our society is the amount of stress, particularly in the United States, to perform and actually to constantly create things, but we don't realize we're the creator. So that's really difficult, right? It's like we feel forced in a way that if we don't do something, we won't be able to pay our bills, won't be able to take care of our kids, all these things. And I can relate to all that because I grew up in America. It was
Yeah,
really,
me
yeah,
too.
yeah. Europe is maybe a little less, but they have other issues. So, but as you go out and you say, let's say you create something, whether you realize you're the creator or you don't realize, you're still creating something by your thoughts, by your creator matrix, all those areas we've been talking about. You go out and you say, I want to get a new job. And then you start to go pursue, and you have to have rightful action at that point to do and get that new job, right? You have to have the right thoughts. You have to have the right feelings. Like, what kind of job would that be? Would it make me happy? All those, whatever we think about emotionally also has to be in alignment. And then we find the new job. Okay. That's the creator. But what we don't do, and this is a big problem, a lot of us, is we don't take the time to rest and digest. And so if we don't digest, we will eventually just have created a lot of stuff, not digested it, and then not integrated it, which means to learn from the whole reason we're here is to have these stories, create them, and digest them and integrate them so we evolve. And when we don't do that part, the reason we have a breakdown is because we have so much undigested stuff,
Yeah,
by whatever age that it just our creator matrix just stops and says, okay, you're not choosing this consciously. So this is going to be chosen for you. See?
yeah.
And then
And
yeah,
you talk about that balance of, it's funny because I have all these notes of things that I wanted to ask you, but there's just like so many things. But that was one of
yeah,
the ones that I was like, if I have extra time,
yeah,
the manifestation digestion cycle, right? And I think what you spoke to is so like current right now. I think so many people, I relate to it so deeply. So many people I think are going to relate to it so deeply because even just in like the zeitgeist of like pop culture or whatnot, like everyone's taught like manifestation is like such a sexy thing,
yeah,
right? And it's like manifesting, 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 right?
yeah,
and and also achieving and like even from like the concept of like social media, right? It's like
oh yeah,
this whole new revolution where literally you're quite literally being rewarded for constantly creating, right?
totally.
And then like as soon as you stop creating, you're penalized. Right? And it's like what, you didn't post it every single day?
Yeah.
Not going to do as well as like Jill over there
Yeah.
that posted every day.
Exactly. Exactly.
Right?
Oh, that's funny.
so, so, so we have the, the manifestation part of it, I think, but how would you advise someone that's like kind of been in this groove of manifesting and been like, well, what is this digesting thing? Like, how do I begin digesting, and what does that look like, that process? Because I think a lot of people are, and I have a theory too, I'm curious if you believe this, but I think the rise in all of our GI stuff is because of we're
Totally.
actually just not digesting life
Exactly.
anymore.
Exactly. That's it. You just named it. You just said it, Cassandra. So our digestive system is our emotional processing center. That's powerful. So everything we choose, we made our bodies this way so that when we would have a life story, we would be able to process it. We gave ourselves a digestion so that we would be able to process it. And we can process food, we can process our life stories, but the food helps us digest our life stories. So when people are constantly eating, what are they trying to digest? Okay? And so but you have to know this, yin yang, there are many people, and I talk about the Enneagram. We don't have time today, but it's in the book. But there are certain Enneagram types that are less creative. They're more digesting, and they've had a bad trauma or something. Even people who've had a bad trauma, then they don't want to go and create because they're afraid to go back out in the world. So they just digest all the time. So we can get stuck in manifestation and digestion and not complete the cycle. And so what I would like to say is, as a creator, we choose all aspects of our reality, even if we're not conscious of it. And people could say, but, they start asking me all kinds of questions like, did we choose our parents? Did we, I believe we did, but that's like, you can't prove that, right? But I believe we choose everything, but I can't prove all that, but I just have that belief system. But what I've learned with my clients is that many are stuck in some part of that creative cycle. And if they've had traumas or too many difficult life stories, then they have trouble going back out. Because they have not really, they just are trying to digest, but that maybe they can't forgive, maybe they can't let go of something that happened, maybe they can't understand it, maybe they don't accept it. And that's all the digestive process I explain in the book. And then they go out, and this is a huge thing I'm saying, because much of my work working with clients is the gut. When I take people into my course, we start with the gut, we end with the gut, and on all levels. So even spiritual, we talk about the different chakras, can you imagine all those chakras go through our gut? I mean,
Oh, yeah.
it's all connected. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So what is a process for someone that is, how would you help someone begin to digest, or maybe walk through, one of the things I love that you kind of went through in the book at one point, where you just kind of, at least it felt like to me, you're just kind of like, okay, time out. Let me just explain, like, what does this look like when I launch my course? Right. Yeah. And I just loved it because it was just like such like a grounding moment where you're like, okay, here's like a really like tangible, like practical thing that a lot of people can relate to. So maybe in an example, whether it's that example or another example of like, for you, let's say, what does a creation digestion cycle look like, as far as like what kind of like practices and things could people start incorporating if they don't even like know where to begin and they're listening to this?
So first of all, realize you are creating. Secondly, what are you allowing in your life? Because you have allowed that, and that's part of your creation, consciously or not. So start to become more conscious of what you want to create. So make it a conscious thing. Start to play with energy and start to say, I would like to change this job, but I would like it to be easy and that it just shows up and I don't have to work hard for it. And then I have to really believe that. Okay. And that's part of making intentions, but not just making them, because it's not just the law of like attraction, it's also the law of frequency. You have to be on all of those levels, that frequency, to attract it. So you have to clear your aura. Remember, we talked, and then you can raise your aura and your emotions. You can, like that job, let's say, would bring this level of joy, and you can vision it, you can see it, you can imagine it, you can, it's real. And
Yeah.
what quantum physics is showing, and now I'm going to really blow some of your minds, is showing us is that we have many different timelines that are possible. And so based on our creator matrix moving through a certain dimension, when we start to believe and really high functioning and everything we do is towards that, whether it's even eating high frequency foods that we're going to heal, maybe that's the intention, we're going to heal, and we believe it totally, then what happens is the other alternative reality dimension that is with you perfectly in health or with that perfect job or whatever, it just comes into this reality. And people say, oh, it's magic. I was magically healed. Or, oh, that job just found me yesterday. I was feeling all this, but it's not. It's science. Isn't that amazing?
It's amazing. So you create it, you align with this job, and then what part of that would be the digestion process? Would
Yeah.
it
So,
be sitting with like and acknowledging like what you
okay.
did?
So we got it. We did it. We're in it. And then we have to take time to allow our creator matrix to integrate what this new job means to us, what we learned by this process, who we are now. And so I give it as an example, this story. I don't even know if I tell this in the course, but it's so funny. I had a wedding, we all have weddings, and I wanted it to be the perfect wedding. And of course, it was exhausting because I married a Dutch guy. So imagine 120 people coming from the Netherlands to America, this huge wedding back then. And my husband was like a control type. So he had an agenda in the first cell phone to make sure he could control everything. But anyway, this whole wedding was like wild. And I loved it. But the creation was so big and it happened. And everyone loved that day. You get so much love. Everyone's hugging you. My hair, I had to do it twice because everyone kept like hugging me, right? My hair was like long then down to my butt. It was like all messy. I remember that. And then we go through this whole thing and I'm so delighted with it. And the next day I'm on a plane to my honeymoon and I vomit for 24 hours because it was all so much, that creation, that I actually couldn't integrate it too fast. It was too much. It was almost too much love. It's hard to imagine, but it was too many people. It was too much experience. It was too much impressions. So if we get that new job, we have to take time to get used to it. And that means all the new people there, the new ways we do it. And so if we go to that job and then we don't take the time, and then we go to the new relationship, don't take the time. Then we go do healings, don't take the time. Then we do whatever. We're exhausted. And then we wonder why our stomach is 10 times bigger.
That is such a great example. One, I also got sick on my honeymoon.
That's funny.
And I think it was the same thing. It was literally the same thing because was talking to my husband about this, not even like a couple of weeks ago, because we went back. We've been married for 2 years now, and we went back on our first anniversary. We got married in France. We went back to the place where we got married for but it was like more of a vacation. Obviously, just us. But I was telling him how, like, I feel like that second trip back actually helped me like digest and integrate it way more than I was like able to do in the moment, because it just felt like
Interesting.
so much. And
Mhm.
then it was so interesting because afterwards I, felt, I didn't throw up, but I definitely got sick. Like I was like tired and I had all these like like symptoms. I ended up taking like a COVID test at the time. I didn't have COVID, but like it was something like that, right? Where it was
Totally.
clearly like my system was overloaded. And you, being in an entrepreneur community, I'm sure you also have a lot of colleagues and friends. Like sometimes when my friends will have some of their biggest launches or biggest
Yeah.
business
Yeah.
successes, they get the flu right after they get
Totally.
right. And it's like, that's just amazing. It's a digestion and an integration, and how, again, we have to be active, creators of also just allowing that space. And I think that's
Yeah.
like a lot of times when I talk about some of like the manifestation principles or whatnot, I always compare it to different video game things, which it doesn't really make sense because I never played video games. I had a little brother that played video games.
Yeah.
But if you think about like in a video game, it's like after you up level, you beat the big boss or whatever your challenge is at the end of the level, right? And then you're on your next level. It's like you spend some time just kind of like exploring that new level in that world and kind of like mussing around before you're like going to take on the next big challenge, boss, whatever, right? And I feel like that metaphor also kind of works, right? It's like when you've had a significant creation experience, to take that time to kind of just enjoy that creation experience before you like try to move on to the next thing already.
Yeah. And sometimes it's not enjoyable. So I give it, that's an enjoyable thing. But there can be an experience like a betrayal. You have a friend, she betrayed you. And then you have the story. This is a story that has been created. We are creators, co created, right? The story. Well, you just go from that to getting a new friend. You don't digest that, you don't assimilate that. If you don't take the time to really process that, then I remember, I mean, I've worked with clients, and then suddenly they're just vomiting because there was something so bad that they felt happened and they experienced, and it was so sad that they just can't accept. And so, what I teach, and I really believe that the stomach is about acceptance. And so, when like a little child, when they come home, well, I had children and they come home and they're sad and they're crying, something dramatic happened. I have a stomach ache, but they don't say what happened. But it's always something they couldn't accept happened. Tommy was mean to me and he pinched me or whatever, and then you say, oh, and then you give it attention, you give it love, you you listen to the child.
Yeah.
Amazing, the stomach ache is gone. Right?
Yeah.
So this is really happening on all levels. So it's really very important for the world to understand what's happening.
Yeah. Oh, this has been so good, Kathleen. I feel like we could do like a 5-part series. I could
Yeah.
talk to you for hours. There's still so much. You guys are going to put the link below to get your Creator Matrix, the book. Highly recommend it. And we just like touched the surface of the the iceberg in
Yeah.
this interview. There's so much more to go through. But how else can people find you and get in touch with you and be part of your world, Kathleen?
Yeah, so they can reach me in a wellness revolution, where I train health and wellness coaches. I will be starting a new course in a year on healing, self healing. So that's going to happen. They can look out for that because I believe all aspects need to be addressed, not just one. And so I want to create a course with all aspects. And then I have a YouTube video where I literally interview people from all over the world since 2020 who are bringing new technologies to the planet for health and wellness. So I believe we're in this new time. It's an amazing time, a great time to be on the planet. And I thank you, Cassandra, from my heart that you reached out and were interested in my book. And well, it's just been a pleasure getting to know you
Yeah.
today.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure picking your
Yeah.
brain and talking about all this.
Well,
It's so exciting.
oh,
And thank you all for listening. I'll have all of Kathleen's links below so you can easily access them, and follow her and follow her journey and her evolution and get this book. This book, I have it on Kindle, so I'm so used to like trying to like pick it up. I'm like,
here it is. I show it. Yeah.
there you go. It's a gorgeous book. I'm very
Yeah, I
excited for
show.
my hard copy to arrive.
Yeah.
Um,
Here's the front. Look at that.
I always believe, books, me and a lot of my friends with our books, I really believe like sometimes just even like holding a book is like a
Yeah.
transmission and a frequency. And this book already just has like so many beautiful codes
You
for
will
us to
you will
receive.
love this. You will love this. Look at this. This is my sister, who's the artist, was in Amsterdam. Do you see it?
Ah!
And
Oh my
so here the
God.
book is in Amsterdam, and the creator is painting because she's a painter, and she is doing a 1-point perspective on how we create our reality.
Oh my gosh. I'm so excited for my hard copy to get here because the Kindle does not do those drawings
No,
justice. Oh
no.
my gosh. Well, thank
Mhm.
you so much, Kathleen. This has
Mm.
been just such a pleasure.